May 2000, the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. 70,000 fans are storming the pitch. Lazio have just won the Scudetto, their first league title in 26 years. Players are dancing, champagne is flowing, but Sven-Göran Eriksson is giving a TV interview like nothing unusual is happening. Drinks are raining down on him, and the reporter asks if this is his greatest ever achievement. He just says, "I hope it won't be the last." The calmest man in football, because 6 months earlier, nobody believed that this was even possible. This is a story of how Sven-Göran Eriksson won everything in one season. In July 97, Eriksson arrived for his first day at Lazio after turning down Blackburn Rovers. The pressure is suffocating, because the last time Lazio won the Scudetto was 1974, 25 years ago, and that team had become a curse. Eriksson knew the story. Tommaso Maestrelli, the coach who forged a miracle. Giorgio Chinaglia, the striker who scored 24 goals and won Lazio their only title. But Maestrelli died shortly after that triumph, and his ghost haunted every manager who followed. Every season, Lazio were compared to 1974, and every season, they fell short. In the 1980s, Lazio were relegated, and in the 1990s, they were back in Serie A, but always finishing behind Juventus, Milan, and city rivals Roma. In 97-98, they finished 7th, and Lazio were becoming a punchline, the eternal outsiders, the club that couldn't handle the pressure. To understand the pressure that Eriksson faced, you need to understand Sergio Cragnotti, Lazio's president since '92, a food industry billionaire who treated the club like his personal empire. Charismatic, ruthless, and obsessed with one goal, making Lazio greater than Roma. Between 92 and 99, he spent over 250 million euros on players, more than any Italian club in history. But the money hadn't delivered, just one Coppa Italia in 98. And in 97, Cragnotti made a gamble. He fired Dino Zoff, the World Cup winning goalkeeper turned manager, and hired Sven-Göran Eriksson from Sampdoria. The Italian media were confused. Eriksson had won titles in Portugal with Benfica, but Serie A was different. Juventus were dominant. AC Milan was spending big. Why hire a calm Swede when you needed a warrior? But Cragnotti saw something that others didn't. Eriksson had reached a European final with Benfica in 1990 and won the Coppa Italia with Sampdoria in 94. He understood pressure, and more importantly, he could handle Cragnotti's ego. On the final day of the 98-99 season, Lazio beat Parma 2-1, but across Italy, AC Milan were beating Perugia. The Stadio Olimpico fell silent as the news filtered through. Milan were champions, and Lazio was second, again. Eriksson stood motionless on the touchline, 7 points behind. For Cragnotti, second place was a failure. 2 weeks later, Cragnotti made one of the most controversial decisions in Italian football. He sold Christian Vieri to Inter Milan for £32 million, a world record fee at the time. Vieri had scored 23 goals that season, and Lazio fans were furious. Protests erupted outside the stadium. How could Lazio win the title after selling their 23-goal striker? But Cragnotti had a plan. That 32 million would fund a midfield revolution. From Parma, Verón, the Argentine playmaker who worked with Eriksson at Sampdoria. Nestor Sensini, the defensive anchor. And from Inter, Diego Simeone, the relentless destroyer. Eriksson now had the most complete midfield in Europe. Verón's vision, Simeone's aggression, Nedved's engine, Stankovic's versatility. And behind them, Nestor and Mihailovic marshalled the defence. Up front, Inzaghi, Salas, and the glorious Roberto Mancini. This wasn't a squad, it was a weapon. Eriksson's tactical blueprint was simple. 4-4-2 but with freedom. When Lazio lost the ball, they became a wall. And when they won it back, they became an avalanche. Italian discipline meets South American flair. But Eriksson knew the truth. Cragnotti's food empire was drowning in debt. The logo on their shirt wasn't just sponsorship. It was a symbol of everything that was at stake. If Lazio didn't win trophies in that season, the entire project would collapse. Eriksson had the squad, he had the system, but could he handle the pressure? As the season kicked off, one thing was clear. Second place was no longer an option. Lazio began their campaign in the European Super Cup against treble winners Manchester United. In the 35th minute, Salas chested down a flick-on and fired past Raymond van der Houw. It was 1-0, the only goal of the game. And after the match, Sir Alex Ferguson walked into the Lazio dressing room and said, "You'll win Serie A this year." Coming from the man who just won everything, it felt like a prophecy. The league season started perfectly. 4 matches unbeaten. Then came AC Milan at the San Siro. What followed was chaos. Verón, Simeone, Salas. It was 3-1 to Lazio. But Milan's new signing, Shevchenko, pulled one back. And then another. Then Milan took the lead. The mental fragility from the previous season was back. But in the 89th minute, Salas scored again to make it 4-4. A point salvaged, and the message was clear. This title race would go to the wire. The next 4 months were a grind. Juventus, led by Ancelotti, were relentless. Every time Lazio won, Juventus won. Every time Lazio dropped points, Juventus capitalised. By February, the gap was just 4 points. Eriksson's squad was exhausted. They were competing in the league, the Coppa Italia, and the Champions League simultaneously. 3 trophies, 3 battles. Craniotti's ultimatum echo: trophies or collapse. In March, they played Hellas Verona, a team that were fighting relegation. Lazio needed to win to keep pace with Juventus. But in the 67th minute, Hellas scored. It was 1-0. Lazio pushed forward. Nedvěd hit the post. Salas missed a sitter. As the final whistle blew, it was defeat. Across Italy, Juventus beat Lecce 2-0. The gap was now 9 points. With just 8 games left, the Scudetto felt gone. In the dressing room, Eriksson sat in silence. His players stared at the floor. The gap felt insurmountable. But the next morning, Eriksson called a team meeting. No tactics, no video analysis. Just one message. We have 8 games left. Juventus will drop points. They always do. But only if we win every single match. All 8. Can you do that? The dressing room sat in silence, then Simeone stood up. We can. Nedvěd nodded. Nestor clenched his fist. The room erupted, and the comeback was on. 9 points, 8 games. The title had felt lost. But then things began to turn. First, Juventus travelled to Milan. Shevchenko scored twice in a 2-1 victory over Juventus. 3 crucial points dropped. The very next day, Lazio faced fierce city rivals Roma. Genuine concern swept through the sky blue side of the city, as within 3 minutes Montella struck. It was 1-0 to Roma. The first half was chaos. Nedvěd was denied a penalty, but moments later he prodded home an equaliser. Then Verón curled home a stunning free kick to make it 2-1. The rest of the half descended into madness. Cafu stretchered off. Candelo was sent off for violent conduct. And in the final seconds, Totti hit the post with the goal gaping. Lazio survived for a 2-1 victory, and the gap had reduced to 6 points. 1 week later, the gap shrunk even further. Lazio travelled to Turin to face Juventus. Despite the best efforts of Zidane and Davids and Del Piero, Juventus couldn't breach the formidable Lazio defence. Juventus centre-back Chiros Ferreira was sent off, and then in a moment of sheer brilliance, Simeone stole in to score a match-winning header. The gap was just 3 points, and momentum was all sky blue. But the following week, disaster struck. Fiorentina away. Lazio led 3-2 in injury time, until Gabriel Batistuta stepped up for a free kick. He blasted it into the top corner to make it 3-3, and that was 2 points dropped. In the dressing room, the players were furious. They'd given Juventus a lifeline. With 3 games remaining, Juventus held a 5-point advantage. They were Italian football's canny old masters, renowned for grinding out championships. They had 25 titles to Lazio's 1. The odds were stacked against them. But then the unthinkable happened. Juventus hosted Verona. All they had to do was win. But in the 23rd minute, Verona scored, and then doubled their advantage to make it 2. The stadium fell silent. Across Rome, the Lazio dressing room erupted in celebration. The gap was just 2 points with 2 games remaining. Eriksson turned to his players. "We win both. We're champions." They still believed. In the penultimate round of fixtures, the drama had reached a fever pitch. Juventus led Parma 1-0 at home in injury time, before Fabio Cannavaro rose to head home an equaliser. But the referee Massimo De Santis disallowed the goal. The replays were inconclusive, but Cragnotti was furious. Everybody saw what happened in Turin. No one can explain why that goal wasn't allowed. Lazio deserved the title, both morally and for our football. Sucker punched by the controversy, Lazio entered the final day just 2 points behind Juventus. Juventus faced Perugia, a team with nothing to play for, and Lazio fans remembered how Perugia had rolled over for Milan the year before. Meanwhile, Lazio hosted Regina. There was no feasible way that this could end well. They did their part. Inzaghi, Simeone and Verón scored the goals in a 3-0 victory. The stadium was a coiled spring of anxiety. All eyes turned towards Perugia. Juventus' match had been delayed for 80 minutes due to a torrential downpour. The pitch was a swamp. Players returned, slogging through the flooded surface. Then, early in the second half, the impossible happened. A hopeful ball into the box wasn't cleared. It fell to centre-back Alessandro Calori. He controlled the ball with his chest, then his knee, and volleyed it into the bottom left corner to make it 1-0 to Perugia. It was chaos. Beautiful, unthinkable chaos. On the flooded pitch, the old masters couldn't even stand. Juventus tried to push forward, but the waterlogged conditions made it almost impossible. At the Stadio Olimpico, 60,000 Lazio fans listened to the radio reports, barely breathing. Then the final whistle went. Juventus 0, Perugia 1. The title was Lazio's. The crowd became an ocean of sky blue, swarming onto the pitch. A quarter of a century of waiting was over. 4 days later, Lazio travelled to the San Siro for the second leg of the Coppa Italia final. They'd beaten Inter 2-1 in the first leg back in April, thanks to goals from Nedvěd and Simeone. Now they just needed to avoid defeat. The match ended 0-0 and Lazio had done it. They'd won the double, Serie A and the Coppa Italia. It was the first domestic double in the club's history. Eriksson, the quiet Swede who'd been mocked for his failures, had delivered the greatest season in Lazio's history. Cragnotti's ultimatum had been answered, and the doubters were silenced. As Eriksson lifted the Coppa Italia at the San Siro, he allowed himself a rare moment of emotion. Against all odds, against Juventus, against the pressure and the chaos, he'd done it. The double was complete. While the high was intoxicating, for a team built on debt, the fall was swift. Cragnotti's empire was built on leveraged bonds, and when they began defaulting in 2001, players' wages went unpaid, and the foundations crumbled. The dream team was dismantled. Eriksson left for the England national team job. Nesta joined Milan. Verón moved to Manchester United, and Nedvěd signed for Juventus. Simeone and Salas were also sold on. Within 18 months, the entire squad was ripped apart. In 2003, Cragnotti was forced to step aside. Soon after, he was arrested on charges of fraudulent bankruptcy. The Emperor of Chirio ended up in prison. In the Curva Nord, the Lazio fans still chanted only one president. But in the Curva Sud, Roma fans asked when Cragnotti and his family would be jailed. He'd achieved grandeur, but by the end he had neither the respect of his players nor the game's administrators. The talent was stripped and the club descended into mediocrity. But the 99-2000 season remains untouchable. Eriksson delivered the greatest season in Lazio's history. The double, the vindication, and the glory. For one perfect season, the Emperor's dream was real. The victory on that chaotic final day could not be repeated. But the story of the 99-2000 team remains iconic. They still tell tales at the Stadio Olimpico about what many believe was the best team never to win a Champions League. After navigating the first group stage unbeaten, they entered the second group stage against giants like Chelsea. In March, they travelled to Stamford Bridge in the bright yellow away kit. Inzaghi bundled in an equaliser and Mihailovic stepped up with a trademark free kick to make it 2-1. They reached the quarter-finals where they met Valencia. The first leg was a collapse, 5-2, and though they won the return leg, it was too little too late. Not since Eriksson's team would Lazio reach the Champions League knockout stages. It was 21 years, the longest gap in the competition history. But the names endure. Verón, Nedvěd, Simeone, Nesta, Mihajlovic, Mancini and Inzaghi. Household names at the dawn of the millennium. Icons at Lazio. For the generation who witnessed it, remains the greatest side they've ever seen. A team of dreams forged by ambition, financed by risk, and delivered by the sheer improbable chaos of Italian football, and the calm demeanour of Sven-Göran Eriksson. The story of Lazio's second Scudetto is more than just a title win. It's a journey to the absolute pinnacle, and a reminder that sometimes the unthinkable can and does happen. If you enjoyed this story about Lazio's title win, check out my Serie A playlist where we feature teams like Palermo and Sampdoria, Parma and Chievo. What are your memories of this great Lazio side? Let us know in the comments below. And in the meantime, stay tuned for more football history. One incredible story